Yeah, there we are. We're on. We're on. The recording's on. Hi. Right, let's start. Right. Hi, my name's Tom. I'm the organizer of Angular Sussex meetup group, and it's my pleasure to be able to introduce our three special guests tonight, which is as part of this.labs World Tour. Sorry, tongue-tied.
Angular World Tour, but we just partner with the Angular team, which has been so amazing.
Marvelous.
Yes, but yeah, we're super happy to do more in the Angular community and keep the love up, traveling to all the different cities.
Well, we appreciate it. I'm just gonna admit, okay. And yeah, we've got Jessica Jannik. I said it, did I say it right? Yes.
Yes, you did.
For the state of Angular. We've got Deborah Kurata for RxJS. Hello. RxJS terms and tips and techniques. And we've got Tracy Lee, last but not least. And she's doing the Quickstart guide to contributing to open source, which I'm looking forward to. Okay. When the presentations start, I'm going to make sure that everybody's muted. But if you've got any questions, you can either raise your Google Meet hand with the button, or you can type questions into the chat as well. Okay, and I'll try and help out with sort of alerting people to questions. Okay, so without further ado, I'll hand over to Jessica. Hello and welcome.
Thank you, thank you. All right, let me present here. See how well this goes. Okay, looks like it's good. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jessica Jannik. I am a senior software engineer on the Angular team at Google. You can find me on Twitter at the Punder Woman. Oh, I just heard a hand go up. What is the question? Or I can just move forward. Okay. All right, so we're going to be talking today about the state of Angular, and let's get started. So first off, what is Angular? It is an integrated platform for the web, specifically built for the web. It's built for everyone. It is opinionated and scalable. That's one of the things we're known for. And it is a mature, stable, and well-supported platform. And we'll talk a bit about all of this throughout this talk, but specifically, let's talk a little bit about Google and Angular. There's four facets we'll look at here. The collaboration that happens between Google teams, how well validated Google is, or Angular is, as it's been around for a long time, and the amount of usage that it has had both inside Google and outside of Google makes it very well validated and tested. On the support side, we have a ton of documentation that's out there, and Google itself has put a ton of resources into Angular and all of the updates that come in around it. So it's very well supported. And on the expertise side, we have a large number of experts out there due to the longevity of the framework's existence. But on top of that, Google is one of the main drivers for the web. So we get a lot of expertise kind of feeding into Angular because of that. So like we build Chrome, for example, and have a lot of people who have deep knowledge with how the web works and how the web it continues to form. So as we go through this, let's talk a little bit about collaboration. We have a bunch of collaboration that has happened within Google, specific teams within Google. For example, Firebase, we do a lot of close work with them through things like Angular Fire and a few other things. We have the Chrome team, which we work with very closely because of the fact that we are using all of the web APIs and want to make sure everything works well. So, and on top of that, Tensorflow Js is another team we've collaborated with. And if you've done anything with machine learning, you'll know what TensorFlow is. So an example of that collaboration is this demo that was put together by Minko and Rob that has to do with using TensorFlow JS and Angular to do an optimized predictive prefetching of e-commerce imagery and speeding up that response. So if you're curious for more information about this demo, there's a couple things you can look at. There's the link in the slides below that has more detail. Unfortunately, it's a fairly long link, so should probably get a short link in there. And you can also check out this talk that actually is from I/O this past year by Rob and Minko, where they actually go through how they put together that demo. It's pretty great. On the validation side, let's talk a little bit about the longevity of like the validation we had to go through for Ivy. So you can see the date on this tweet from Minko is February 7th, 2018. And here we are in November of 2021. And only just now are we finally removing View Engine. So this was the first announcement that Ivy was coming. And that's how long it took us to essentially build out and validate that Ivy was going to do the things that we needed it to do. And all of that time made it more highly validated and reliable. You can also see that in version 9, we actually released Ivy for the first time, available to the public. And that happened before I even joined the team, I believe. This was a big milestone for us back in February of 2020. And then like some of the validation actually shows up in data. So here we have some information about the differences between the sizes of the output from our old compiler NGC and our new one in GTSC, and how it has drastically reduced the payload sizes. Within Google, we have thousands of applications that that are currently now finally running Ivy. Ask me how I know. I only spent the last year working on making sure Ivy would land in Google 3 appropriately. There's some differences with how Angular is used within Google versus outside of Google, and it took a bit of effort for us to make sure Ivy could successfully land within Google. But because of that, now we have thousands of applications that have just about every potential use case you can imagine within Google, which means we have just about every possible validation you could ask for of the framework itself and of the rendering engine, which means that any third-party user of Angular is going to be able to trust that Ivy is going to do and Angular is going to do what you want it to do, and that you can rely on it. Some of the stats that come along with actually having Ivy land within Google is that we saw a 90% reduction of computational resources. That's giant, and especially at Google scale. And we also saw for our largest client or customer within the biggest app within Google, we saw almost an hour reduction in their build time. So that's huge too. It saves a lot of developer resources, time, and energy. People can actually get more work done because of the fact that we have improved those build times so much just by changing out the rendering engine. I mean, just by, it's a big project. On top of that, so along with Ivy came our developer tools, which were built specifically with Ivy in mind, and that gives us more visibility into, and gives you more visibility into the ins and outs of your application, being able to profile it and debug it much faster and easier, which just wasn't as easy before, and that's wonderful. We also now have much clearer error codes and guides, and those guides have been viewed 400,000 times over the last few months, which is amazing. This expression changed after checked, we know, is a more challenging error to have to resolve. We spent a bunch of time resolving a bunch of them ourselves, so we're well aware that there's a lot more challenge that comes with this particular error, but it's super valuable, and we'll continue to try to make even more inroads into making these errors even easier and clearer to understand and resolve. One of the other things we started doing within the last couple of years is we started publishing our roadmap, and that plays directly into the reliability of and the validation of Angular, so that folks who are using it can see the future of the framework, and that we're not just going to kind of like drop off the surface of the web, that people can see forward as to what we're planning on doing and can plan around that effectively and know that they can reliably know we'll still be there, that their investments that they're making in this framework are worth it. On that roadmap, we've been tracking upwards of 35 projects, and we've had quite a number, like 300,000 visits. I'm sure that number has gone up in the time since these slides were made, but still pretty impressive number. And if you have been following Angular for a long time and have been kind of keeping up on GitHub with it, you'll have noticed that over the past couple of years, as we were working on Ivy, we saw a steady increase in pull request count and issue count, almost hitting 3,000 issues. And we put a ton of effort into changing that through something we called Operation Bylog, where we were allowed to spend up to 50% of our time triaging issues. We also did a bunch of fix-its where we spent a week only triaging issues. And then we've also added this feature request bot that has helped us address some of these as well and close old issues that haven't seen any activity. And through this effort, it's been a huge reduction. I just checked this morning, and I think we're down to under 140 open pull requests, and we're still triaging that. We're looking at writing some policies around how do you handle old PRs and dealing with stuff that's sat stagnant. But that's been a huge inroad for us and for making it clear to folks that we are putting the effort into maintaining this and making it and that we're responsive to the needs and wants of the community. And we've also dropped down to, I think this is pretty close to accurate. I think we're at 1,700 GitHub issues, about right there. And that is a continual effort for us. We're going to continue looking at all of those. Also, some of the big efforts we've put in is through social media. So there's been a lot of effort put into our Twitter presence and our YouTube channel. And specifically on the YouTube channel side, we recently hit 100,000 subscribers. We also have hit 400,000 followers on Twitter, which is awesome. And big kudos to Emma Tversky and Mark Thompson for their efforts specifically in this area. Both of those folks are awesome, and you should be checking out their content. They've put a ton of really good effort into their stuff. It's great stuff. So beyond all of that, we have had this RFC process that we've been doing, and we've been changing our process for feature requests to invite more commentary on everything that we've been putting out there. So for example, we've had these RFCs. With this RFC process, we recently deprecated support for Internet Explorer 11. We had an RFC out there for Protractor and end-to-end testing. We got a lot of really good feedback through those RFCs, a lot of engagement, and that's been great because it helps the community feel like they have a solid contribution and ability to have a voice within the community. So we get more clear signal that we're doing the right thing for the framework and meeting the needs of those of you who are all using Angular on a daily basis. We're excited about V13, which landed last week, Wednesday, which was November 3rd. And this is a big effort for all of us. We've had a bunch of big projects happening and landing all at the same time, and V13 ended up going up really smoothly, aside from some CI issues that we had. And this came with some really big, exciting things like the removal of Internet Explorer 11 support. If you've been involved in the web as long as I have, you'll you'll know that Internet Explorer has been challenging to deal with. It has involved us adding a lot of things like polyfills to backfill support for things. And there's a lot of complexity that was added to the framework in order to support some of the limitations of the Internet Explorer browsers. So now we actually have room to add things like CSS variables, intersection observers, and all of these really cool APIs that we've wanted to make use of, but we haven't been able to because we had to support the old browsers. And for those of you that unfortunately still have to use support Internet Explorer, you can still use V12, and that'll be around and supported for the next year, I believe. Might even be 2 years. I don't remember what our LTE policy is for support on that, but it will still be around, and you can still use that and until you have the ability to deprecate your support for IE as well. We also were able to create an Ivy library distribution package that does partially compiled Angular. This is the best package format we've had so far, and it's partially compiled as opposed to fully compiled because of just wanting to maintain the most compatibility we can with all the different versions of Angular that are out there. So we are able to compile partially instructions so that we can better meet the needs of all of the different versions that people have that they're using. So the right instructions are compiled for the right version. We also removed UMD bundle support, and we've also updated to support ES 2020 output and have an async await via transform so that Zone.js still works properly. And this is all very exciting stuff for us to be able to move to more latest and greatest ECMAScript support. Let's see. So this talks a bit about some of the changes we've made with our build. We were able to swap out our build optimizer for a Babel transform, which has allowed us to improve our builds by 10% as far as speed is concerned, and that's huge. I'm sure you're all noticing that within your builds now, and we're really happy about that. We're going to, of course, continue to put effort into trying to make that build speed as optimized and as fast as possible for all of you. Additionally, V13 comes with things like Adobe font inlining. We've got the Webpack 5 caching, dynamic validator control, and significantly improved accessibility support. We've been putting a lot of effort into accessibility, specifically with our material design component library. The vast majority of components now are natively supported strongly with accessibility support now. We've been putting a ton of effort directly into just that. And I saw a hand, or I heard a hand go up. Somebody have a question?
Sorry, no, that was just me trying to find a gesture to cheer the accessibility efforts. I wasn't trying to raise a hand. Thank you. Gotcha.
Okay, great. Awesome. So there are still a couple of components that haven't yet fully been optimized for accessibility. There's still work being done. So the last few components will slowly trickle in over time as we finish doing all of this work on them. So what are we building next? We've got a few upcoming improvements we're looking at. We've got something we call extended analysis, which is kind of like linting, but not linting. It's template analysis so that you'll get more warnings and messages about your template structure before you actually see these issues surface when you run your app. That should make it a lot easier for you to catch problems before they're problems. We've got a simplified factory API coming. We've got a lot more advanced guides coming, both through documentation and through the YouTube channel. And as I mentioned, the material design components on the web are continuing to be worked on and updated for accessibility, as well as making sure they're continuing to be in line as much as possible with the material design spec as it changes and adapts over time. And then there's the exciting stuff that's coming in the future. This one's a big one that I know a lot of people are very curious about. So standalone components is something that is currently in the kind of proposal stage that has been put out there for people to comment on. There is a design for it. And what does this look like? Well, it's a big paradigm shift potentially for folks that work with Angular. Everybody's familiar with modules, and this would essentially make modules an optional thing. Modules will still be around, but you wouldn't necessarily have to use them. So this is what we see now as far as what a component looks like. And we've got a bit of an example here of what it might look like with standalone components, where we have this standalone true flag within the component itself, and a separate bootstrap component that would be able to bootstrap the component by itself. There's a bit more syntax that would be involved here, involving things like injectables and directives and some of the same stuff that you see with a module. And if you're curious about that, please go check out the proposal that's out there, and you can see the design in its fullest. It's very exciting to see where this is going. And yeah, there's a lot more than that coming, but a lot of it is still in the early stages, and you can definitely check out the roadmap for more information on that. Otherwise, that's pretty much all I have for you all today. So again, my name is Jessica Jannik. I'm a senior software engineer on the Angular team, specifically on the framework side. You can find me on Twitter at @thepunderwoman, and if you have any feedback, you're welcome to follow this link and fill out that form. Otherwise, if you have any questions, feel free, and thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jessica. Does anybody have any questions whilst we're still here? No, we're quite quiet tonight. It's obviously yeah, we've got a comment, but yes, got some thanks for you. If you like, I see Deborah's doing a virtual clap. I'm going to give you a genuine clap, and maybe others could join in. Okay. There you are. Oh, look at that. There you go. It's a nice bit of applause.
Jessica.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you. Is it all right, Jessica, if we hand over to Deborah now?
Absolutely.
Marvelous. The floor is yours.
Okay, I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay, can you all see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay, so we're going to be, oh, I forgot to change the name on my slide. Sorry about that. This is not Memphis. We could pretend we're in Memphis. We just need to have some blues or something. Okay, so we are in Sussex, and we are talking about reactive programming with RxJS, terms, tips, and techniques. So that's me totally nerding out. I don't know if there are any other fans that know exactly where I am here, but this is I got a couple of nods. This is one of my favorite places, and I was so thrilled to get to go in 2018, in the before times. So I'm a software developer, and I'm a Pluralsight author. The course more closely related to this talk is RxJS and Angular reactive development. Okay, so we're going to start with a really difficult problem, and I'm hoping that you all can help me solve this. So what is Z? And if you could just type right into the messages if you think you know what Z is. I know it's a difficult question for this late in the evening, already past happy hour, whatever. Anyone know the answer to that? Yes, it is, of course, it is 8. So yeah, good job. Anyway, there is a point to all of this. And that is what happens now afterward if I change x to 7. Now, this is following just arithmetic, or I should say maths, I guess, with an S on the end. Now what is z?
Still 8. It didn't change.
It is correct. It is still 8. Why is that? Well, the value is assigned when the expression is first evaluated. Z does not react to changes in X or Y. So now it's starting to make sense as to where I'm going with all of this. And I'm sorry if you see me looking this way from time to time. I'm looking at the messages coming out. It's not that I'm ignoring you. All right, so what if we want Z to react to changes to X and Y? What if we have a shopping cart kind of application, and when the user modifies the quantity, we want the subtotal to change here, to change over here, the delivery fee to potentially change, taxes, total. What if we want that reaction? Then what do we do? Well, here's a little thought experiment. And again, if you would be so kind as to type the answer into the discussion chat window, what techniques could you use to react to changes in the quantity? So of course, we've got our item and our price and our quantity, and we want our extended price there to be reacting to changes in the quantity. How would we do it? Anybody want to type something in? Yes. 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 Okay, so assuming you didn't know about observables, one option might be to use something called a function or a getter function, where we would have a getter with the extended price, and we could return the price times the quantity every time the code was changed and the change detection kicked in. It would recall the get and re-give you the new extended price. The problem with something like this, though, is if we go back, we have two different components here. We've got this product detail component, and we've got our summary or total component here. So reacting to changes here could make this number here change, but it won't help us with this other component. We would still have to somehow send a message. Another option would be to use an event, but this has that same problem. It still needs somehow to notify that other component. So what if we instead use this wonderful thing like you all suggested, which is our observable? So here we're going to declare our observable, and this is pseudocode, so this isn't actual real code. I wanted to keep it simple for those that might not be familiar with the syntax, so we could focus first on the concept. So here in my generic parameter, I am telling it what kind of thing I want to be observing, what I want it to be emitting out for the whole rest of the system to observe. And then in my parentheses here, I'm providing a default value, because when you first put something into your cart, the presumption is that you do want at least one of them. Excuse me. So the observable will emit items over time. It will let any other parts of the application observe how that value is changing. Then we emit when an action occurs. So on our quantity change, we're going to emit that quantity. So we're saying, hey, observable, here's a new value. Then we're going to react to those emissions. So every time the quantity changes, whenever you change, I'm going to change. So we're reacting to those emissions. We can even take it a step further, and in addition to the extended price, we can have our tax react to that. We can have our delivery fee react to that. We can even combine some, and again, this is pseudocode. It doesn't have all the thises and extra braces and all the stuff we need. So we can combine all of these. So when any of these change, we can react to that change. We can then calculate the total for our total component. And the most exciting thing about all of this then any part of the application can subscribe to these notifications. Hey, the value changed. And they will get notified without knowing anything about each other. So they do not have to be tightly coupled. They don't need to know that even each other exists or whether they're open or not or whatever. As long as they're subscribing, they're going to get notified. So we've been talking about two different programming paradigms. The imperative, where the value is assigned when the expression is first evaluated, and the reactive, which we're indicating with the $sign here, just to visually show, it doesn't actually mean anything, but we're visually showing that we're going to have this variable react to changes. So those changes will be propagated. So that brings us to the term reactive programming. What is reactive programming? It's basically a declarative programming paradigm concerned with data streams and the propagation of change. Or to say it another way, code is reactive when an input change, something maybe that the user does, leads to an automatic change in the output. So I'm going to change the quantity here, and it's going to automatically change my subtotal, change my delivery. Now it's free because I've spent enough money, my taxes, and so on. So why? Why do I want to do this? Why would I want to use reactive programming techniques? Well, we can more easily react to user actions, and we just saw that in our demonstration. We can compose streams of data. So we can merge these together, sort of like we just saw with the combination in order to calculate our total. We can communicate between our components without having to couple them together. And we can also help manage application state, which I'm not really covering too much in this particular talk. So where do I go get the observables? Reactive extensions. So reactive extensions are an implementation of reactive programming principles. They're basically a library for composing these observable data streams. You might not know it, but reactive extensions were originally developed by Microsoft as Rx.net. Microsoft is coming out with an enhanced version of their reactive extensions that is calling Reactor. So if you're interested in that, you can Google that and find out more about that. But it's their improved cloud-based Rx implementation. There are also Rx versions for Java, Python, Ruby. But of course, the one we're interested in is RxJS, which is the version for JavaScript. It's also important to note that reactive extensions has nothing to do with Angular particularly. We use it in Angular, but it could also be used in React, Vue, JavaScript, just vanilla JavaScript, and TypeScript. The difference about it with Angular, though, is when you create a new Angular project, you do automatically get Rx installed by default. There is also some talk about making observable an actual part of the JavaScript language specification, ECMAScript. And if you're interested in learning more about that, I've got a link for that there. And somebody asked a question about where to put this service, and where to put the observable in the service or in the component. We're going to talk about that in a minute. All right, so our next term then, of course, is observable. We've been using that word, but what is one actually? It's a collection of items over time. So it's sort of like an array where we've got this collection of items. But unlike an array, it doesn't actually retain those items, at least not by default. Rather, emitted items can be observed over time. So here is an array. I could say, all right, give me the third entry element of the array. I could ask you to sort the array or reverse the array, and we would be able to do that. But an observable is like this. There it is. There's the next one. There's that. Oh, I didn't quite get that third one. Did you see what that was? Because, oh, now it's gone. So once it's been emitted, it's gone unless you are doing something to retain it or using a specific kind of observable that knows how to retain some of those values. All right, Angular, of course, creates observables. Routing emits parameters via a param map observable. Form control emits a value via a value changes observable. You've probably used those. The most common one, though, that we use is the HTTP client methods emit the response via an observable. So you've probably seen lots of code that looks like this. It issues an HTTP GET request and then just returns an observable and keeps going along. At some later point in time, the response comes back. That then is emitted from the observable. In this case, it's an array of products, and we get that data, and we can then pipe it through a set of operations. Okay, so how do we emit into this observable? So we've been talking about, when something reacts to changes, we want to emit that change. So say we have a product we want to add. How do we emit that into this observable? Or say we want to track the selected one. How do we emit that into that observable? And the answer is we don't. We cannot emit anything into this observable ourselves. Any observable that's created by Angular, they only give us the read-only observable part of it. So we can subscribe to actually get the values, but we cannot put anything back into that stream. We can only see what's emitted from the stream. So, Deborah, then what was the whole point of the whole first part of this talk if I can't emit anything into these observables? Well, you have to use a different kind of your own observable called a subject or behavior subject. These are special types of observables that are similar to event emitters, but unlike event emitters where you can emit any kind of event, they only know how to emit 3 different kinds of notifications. Next, the next item is emitted and you get that item. Error, an error has occurred and you get that error, or complete, you don't get anything else and the observable is complete and will not emit anything further. Consumers can then subscribe to receive these notifications. Okay, so how do we define these? Normally, what you will see is you will see a 2-line pattern for creating these. Now, I color code my code on my slides because it's hard to tell otherwise where this code should go. Purple is implying a service. So this code would be in a service private to that service. So you notice I've got the private keyword here. Why? Because I want this subject to be encapsulated in my service. So there isn't any other part of the application that can emit into this stream other than my service. I then use the new keyword to create a new subject. This is actual code, not pseudocode. I use then my generic parameter to pass in the type of data I'm going to emit, which is my number. However, just like when Angular creates these, I want any other part of my application to get the read-only part and to be able to get and observe those emitted values. So I then define a second variable, which is public by default, that is the as observable, the read-only part of this subject. So is that kind of making sense? So I have my private subject that only my service can emit into, but I'm letting any other part have access to this observable that they can subscribe to and get these notifications. Are we good? All right, great. If you need to have a default value, then you want to use a behavior subject instead. So the key difference between a subject and a behavior subject is if you have any late subscribers, say, for example, the user suddenly opens up a tax calculator. If that opens up later, if we defined the quantity subject as a subject, it would not get notified of the most recent emission because, again, by default, Once it's been emitted, it's gone. Behavior subject, though, has a special ability where it can remember the last emitted value. And if nothing has been yet emitted, it uses its default value, which is what I'm giving here as this one here. Because again, normally when you want to purchase a product, when you put it in your cart, you normally want at least one. So what we would want to do is use a behavior subject if you need a default value, like in our case, when you want newer subscribers that come along to have access to that current value, or when the observable must emit as part of a combination or other operation. And we'll look at an example of that in just a couple minutes. Okay, so once we have our observable defined, we want to have some method that is going to emit a value into the stream. So we use the next to emit this quantity into the stream. So that's all well and good, but how do you actually make this work then? Because this is all encapsulated into our service. So let's talk through exactly how this all would work. So we're going to start with our UI that we looked at a moment ago. The user is going to modify the quantity. So I'm going to change the quantity here. The UI then generates a selection changed event. So I've changed the quantity to 3. The UI is going to say, hey, the user changed the quantity to 3, and it's going to provide a notification. What does that look like? Green is my UI. So in my UI, in my template, I'm going to have my select was a little drop down that let me select a quantity. And when a quantity is selected, I'm going to pass that along to the onSelected method. In the component, my components are blue. I am going to call the quantity change from the service. I can't emit directly into the stream because that stream is private in my service. Okay, so the question is, no need to explicitly declare the QTY as read-only. It should be read-only by making it private, so that extra shouldn't be needed, though I have noticed more people using read-only instead of private. I would have to actually look into, I don't know if anyone knows off the top what the difference really is between the read-only and the private. Maybe it generates different JavaScript under the covers. I'm not certain. Anyway, okay, so moving on. Now the UI has generated a selection changed event, and the code is going to respond to the changed event, and it's going to emit the new quantity into the observable stream. So what would that look like? So now our code is saying, oh, okay, now I've got your event that the quantity is changed. I'm going to emit that now into the stream. So here again is our component. Here was our onSelected. It's calling this service. In our service, again, we have our subject. We're using a behavior subject to have a default value. And then here is our quantity change. So our component is calling the quantity changed in our service to actually have that value emitted. The code then reacts to emissions and propagates the change. So the code's like, hey, I'm going to react and propagate that change in multiple places. So here's the extended price. It's going to react to that quantity by mapping that quantity times the current price. The tax is then going to propagate that change in the price and calculate the new tax. The delivery fee is then also going to be recalculated, because if I get more than 35 pounds, then it goes to 0. Otherwise, it's $5.99. And then my total price. And again, this is now real code with all the extra parentheses and thises and stuff. So this is going to combine the extended price, delivery fee, and tax. So if there's a change to any of them, it will re-perform this calculation. So it's propagating the change throughout the application. Lastly, then, any UI or code subscribed to the observable receives a notification and that emitted value. So our UIs are like, hey, I have a new value, and change detection will kick in and display the new values. So we didn't ever have to do anything to tell it to update the UI, and we didn't need to do anything to actually update these values. They were updated automatically when those notifications were received. All right, so I've got a quick little demo. So here, and I have the link to this on the slides here in a minute, but here I did a simplified version of what we just talked about. So if I change the quantity, it automatically updates all of the total information. As a simple little example, I didn't make it multiple components, but you get the idea here. And then if I change this from a behavior subject to a subject, I can't then have a default. And because this is not then emitting right away, the combine latest won't emit until everything emits at least once. The extended price won't emit if the quantity hasn't emitted. So by using a subject and not emitting that default value right away, it's not performing all of these additional calculations until I actually change something. So this is an example of why I would want behavior subject instead. So it immediately emits that default value and all my calculations are executed. Yes, I can paste that into the link as well. Whoops. And because I formatted it nice, it's not spacing nice on the link. Hopefully that did it. Okay. Somebody was much faster than me. Okay. Going back to the slides then. All right, some key points. Using a reactive programming approach can make your application more reactive. We want to declare an observable stream, emit into that stream on some kind of action, click events, variable changes, operation, notifications, and so on. And we want to react when a value is emitted into the stream. The UI or other code then subscribes to that observable to be notified of emissions. So I'm looking at the questions now. Would you call complete on a subject as calling next afterwards, notify the subject observable to start emitting again, and the subscribers receive values again? No, once you call complete, I believe that it's done, and I don't think that you can restart it again, though I would have to try it to be absolutely certain. I don't know if anyone has ever tried that, but my understanding is complete and you can't make it go again. Same thing with an error, actually, which is one of the really challenges of error handling and exception handling in observables, is once you get an exception in a stream, the stream completes and you cannot get it to go again. So it can be challenging doing exception handling. So you're saying observables shuffle around the data. Observables emit values and you can react to those emissions. Could you paste your stacklets? Yes. Why would someone use a regular subject instead of a behavior subject? If you do not need a default value, if you don't need it to retain a value that can be emitted to newer subscribers, then a subject works perfectly well. I've used it especially for little things like if I want even my error messages to be subjects because I want to use on push. I've declared actually my error message string as a subject just in my component because I didn't feel a need for a service to manage the error messages in one component, and I used a subject for that. Okay, there's my things. The slides we're using the space shuttle as the example project. If you'd use a regular subject, if you don't, yeah. Okay, all right. So extra nerd points, if anyone knows where in Middle Earth I am right here. Anybody know? This is actually Mount Summer. Oh, I'm sorry, Mount Sunday. I always say that wrong. Mount Sunday, which is where they built Edoras, the horse lords. They had the Golden Hall up on there. They had the funeral of the king's son just right down there. So if you picture that with a huge castle on the top and a little village kind of down over here, that's where that was. It was the coolest place. But anyway, any other questions? Han, if you raised a hand, go ahead.
Hi, Deborah. Also, I have a question which sort of ties into RxJS and also to Jessica. It is about that if you have a component and that component has multiple inputs, and those inputs can change at any given time. And what you want to do is invoke a function the first time you have at least one value, and then subsequently every time one of those inputs changes. So that is an example where you also had the combined latest, right?
Yes.
So I was wondering, is there a way to accomplish this whole thing with, I will just paste quickly a link. So I posted a question on Stack Overflow quite some time ago. So the thing is like, to accomplish this, it takes a lot of boilerplate. And I was wondering if there are any more elegant solutions to that. One proposal on the Angular issues was actually closed by Jessica about having observable inputs. So I was wondering if there are any elegant solutions to accomplishing this, because this architecture of a small component receiving a lot of inputs, and you need to sort of sync them together in order to call a function is a frequent use case I have, for example, in a component widget or something like that. And I was just wondering to get maybe some of your expert opinion on how we can maybe do it better.
Okay, I have used a combined latest approach. And I don't know if it would work in your specific scenario, but I have bound everything to a single observable using a view model kind of concept. What I'll do is I'll take a look at your Stack Overflow offline and post something there. I've got some examples of the view model concept from my RxJS course that I did for Pluralsight. And I can post that there on the link. So I've opened the link on another window, so these will probably go away as soon as the meeting's done. And I will take a look.
Okay, thanks a lot. Because we usually use like a behavior subject in the data service to do all the heavy muscles as you're supposed to do with Angular. And it just like seems a lot of boilerplate to accomplish something which seems trivial, but we need like at least 20 lines of code to do that. And it is, especially now these days, to having like small isolated components doing their own things, really handy. So I was just wondering. But yeah, if you could maybe give some feedback on that, I would really appreciate it.
Okay.
I can also, I can comment on this too. That issue, I think, was the very first issue I actually closed in the Angular repo. And after I joined the team. And yeah, that I know that issue has a lot of interest and desire for it to happen, and we are aware of that. We do have a lot of plans around reactivity. we are currently looking at how we can potentially make RxJS an optional dependency so that if people want to use it, they can. And if they don't want to use it, they don't have to. But in doing so, we have to come up with ways to make like observable-like behaviors surface within the entire framework so that it can work with observables or without observables. So the input issue is one of those exact things. If we make it an observable, we kind of tighten the ties between RxJS and Angular, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does make it harder if people want to make it an optional dependency and they don't necessarily want to use it for some simple application. So we're looking at what we can do as more of a long-term, like how can we solve this problem while meeting the needs of both RxJS and non-RxJS users while maintaining reactivity. So the only reason the issue was closed is because we're not essentially going to address that issue in that exact way. We are still looking at it as a big need for the framework. There's a lot coming, especially now that Ivy has landed. We are a fairly small team, and we're looking at what we can do to make these big inroads with new features that are long awaited, like this one. So
Well, we've got
Okay,
a couple
thanks for the
more
feedback,
questions. Yeah, we've got a couple more questions associated with that, Jessica, and maybe Han might want to chime in as well. But Agent RR, I think he's responded to something that Han said, and would like to extend that.
Yeah, so basically, if we extract RxJS from Angular, wouldn't that make Angular slower? One, and also the other thing is, like, right now, we don't really need to use all of RxJS. The only way that is using it right now, like as a default, is probably on the router and also on the what do you call it, HTTP request, right? So couldn't they just circumvent that and not? I mean, they don't have to learn much to use those.
yeah, it's a bit more involved in that, but you're correct in that, like, the router and the HTTP client heavily rely on RxJS. It's natively built in, but it's not a matter of slower or faster. It's as an optional dependency, it just gives people choice. We expect a lot of people will still use RxJS just like they're using it now, but there are a lot of situations where people are not wanting to use RxJS, and they're tied to the dependency because it's natively intrinsically in the framework. Let's say they're building a much smaller application and they don't want to have that as part of their bundle size. So the goal we're ultimately looking at is being able to declare whether you want to use it or not, and be able to tree shake it out if you don't want to use that, and have that smaller bundle size if you're just doing something that is simple. But obviously we've put a lot into our investment with RxJS within Angular, and it's not like it's going to go away. We're not like getting rid of it. We're just giving people more options to be able to do what they would prefer to do with their framework, whether they would like to use it or not. Entirely up to them. So that's kind of the long-term goal. It's not about removing RxJS entirely.
Jessica, I just wondered if I could sort of pose a thought here. I think something that other RxJS users might be interested in, and probably comes up quite commonly in the issues, is are we ever going to get a native way to unsubscribe from RxJS in Geon destroy? You know, because everybody's using different ways. They're using this and that, and they're loading up an array of subscribers, or they've got one subscriber that they're loading up, or they're using one of the third-party libraries. I mean, can't we just set a flag and have the framework take care of this stuff?
It's definitely one of those things we are aware of as well. I wouldn't suggest using this because, you know, there's a lot of confusion around this within JavaScript frameworks. And I don't think that is a thing unless you reassign this. I'm joking. But we know this is a problem, and there's a number of situations with there's a number of reasons why we haven't been able to do it. It has a lot to do with accessibility within the bowels of the framework, of being able to access certain things within the ng on destroy. We are aware, though, I think that there are still issues within our issue tracker surrounding this. I don't think we've closed any of those. So it's an ongoing thing that we'll be definitely working on, and we're aware that there's a need. So.
And the big question I get frequently is, why isn't reactive forms actually reactive? So kind of the other way, why isn't RxJS more implemented in, especially for something like reactive forms that really does not play well at all with observables?
I am definitely not the reactive forms expert, and there's a lot of people weighing into whether reactive forms or template-driven forms are the right choice. There's a couple people on the framework team that specifically work on forms themselves. Andrew Kushner, if you know him, he is kind of like our main person around forms, and he knows that system very well. But we have ongoing conversations as well about forms in particular, and reactivity within them, typing within them. There's a big effort going on within Angular right now for typed forms. And we know these are pain points. And Han, I think you mentioned something about the new Angular developers, a high learning curve, and yeah, we're aware of that too with RxJS. It is a deterrent. That's another reason why we've wanted to make it optional, so that people can onboard to Angular and learn it without that learning curve. And then when they want to learn RxJS, they can add it in when they're ready for it. So yeah, please keep +1ing the issues that we have around that component is destroyed stuff. The more signal we have on the needs of these issues, is the higher the priority they are for us, and the faster we can get them done. So please visit the repo. Please interact with our issue tracker and our features, so that we know and have good, clear signal on what you all need and what your priorities are.
Thank you. Has anyone got any further questions for Deborah?
I have one more slide, and that's just with my links. You can follow me on Twitter. Here again is the link for that sample application. And here is a link to some more RxJS YouTube videos that I've done.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind, you could paste those into the chat for me, because I'll make sure they're shared. Okay. And same for you, Jessica, if you fancy popping some of those in. Thank you. Well, I think it's that time where we get to give Deborah a round of applause. I don't know about you guys, but you know, she's one of those people who's been around training us for years, and we, you know, I think generally we appreciate her. So I want to give her a clap. Here we go.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is it okay with you if I bring Tracy on? Is that okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, let's go for it. So without further ado, Tracy, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I actually have a hard stop. So unfortunately, I'll cut mine a little bit short. But good to see everybody today. Excited about speaking here. Excited that y'all are joining, and you know, definitely enjoyed the talks, and so many exciting things happening. So I get this question a lot: how can I contribute to open source? And I'm here to actually answer this question. So the great thing about open source is that there's so many ways to be able to contribute. And today is just going to be a quick start guide. For those of you who don't know me, you can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet. I'm on the RxJS core team, so I love hearing some of the stuff about RxJS, and I love Deborah's representation on RxJS. Thank you. I'm also a Google developer expert for Angular, Microsoft MVP, and a bunch of other fun things. back to my day job. So I'm the CEO of a company called This.Labs, and we get to work with some really amazing clients. And I know those of you who are not in the US have like really long periods of notice, as we do have some team members on your side of the pond. But if you are interested in working with us, we are hiring. We're 100% remote and worldwide. So this is how I make friends. Feel free to email me anytime. So let's get back to the presentation really quickly. And I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about my journey first. So for my journey, you know, I started going to a boot camp. I started sharing what I was interested in the community. I joined Twitter. I found people who were talking about Angular, and they seemed like nice people. And then I started meeting them at different conferences, and you know, kind of the rest is history. So one of the biggest things that I did, I mean, I was doing stuff, but from a contribution standpoint, you know, my friends were on the RxJS core team, and they seem to need some help in terms of the documentation. At that point in time, it was like, God, you Google, and I mean, if you think Googling RxJS right now is confusing, like the RxJS 4 and 5 documentation, we're getting all mixed up and messed up. Right now, actually, we're looking for more contributors to help us with all the documentation related to RxJS 7. So if you go to the docs right now, I mean, there is stuff that just generally needs to be updated, and we totally welcome those PRs. So please let me know if you're interested. You can, again, follow me on Twitter @LadyElite and ask any questions you like. So my path was actually, you know, I mean, it was pretty chill, I would say. You know, I just started hanging out with people, and, you know, life happened, right? But I will say that, you know, probably you have different reasons of why you're wanting to. I like to boil it down to 2 reasons, whether it's functional or aspirational. Functional is, you know, you're probably using Angular for work, a lot of you, and you need to fix something that's not working for you, right? Like that was a great example of, who was it that was posting? I think it was Han. Han was posting stuff. So he probably just needs something to like generally work, right, for Angular. And, you know, that makes sense. Or aspirational, right? You might be here and you might say, oh man, I want to like build a career in open source. That's a totally valid reason as well. If you're functional, I think one of the first things to do is definitely make sure you give before you ask. So doing things like responding to questions, or even like showing up to meetups, you know, finding maintainers in other forums. You know, like you all met Deborah here, and, you know, she was so nice to like look at a Stack Overflow question. So if you talk to people and just generally meet people in other forums, they're more likely to respond to you versus like a random, hey, I have this problem, I need help, like help me, right? Because you've already kind of established a relationship. Also, again, giving before you're asking. Like, for example, if you really need to use RxJS in your work, and you need some help from Ben Lesh, let's say, if you're contributing to the documentation, again, even just small things, these changes that we need in the documentation right now are not big PRs. They're very small, nuanced PRs that you're probably finding as you're going through the documentation generally, right? If you do that, he's much more likely to spend some time with you and help you through whatever issue you might have in the future. So making sure you give before you ask. Also submitting an issue and asking for feedback first. You know, you might always want something to be changed within a library, whether that's Angular or RxJS or whatever library it is. But, you know, there could be reasons why things aren't changed or haven't been changed. Like, for example, you could really want a new operator in RxJS because you think it'll make your life easier. But there's probably a reason why it wasn't added, right? And there's probably been a conversation about it. So if you want to start those conversations, again, a great way is just to submit an issue first and ask for feedback. Also building genuine relationships, right? Like everybody here is, I feel like everyone in open source really is doing it because they love open source, they love helping people. And so just approaching relationships like that is really great because nobody likes to, you know, feel used. So building genuine relationships is really important. I love being aspirational when it comes to open source because you can actually just go around and look at all the different teams, go through all the different, RFPs RFCs and the issues and the PRs, and just kind of get to know people. And you'll see very much so like, okay, these people really jive with me or these people don't, right? Two of the communities I really like right now, unfortunately, they're in React, are Blitz.js and Redwood.js. I feel like the maintainers are really, really, really open to like new people contributing, and their community is really open and welcome, and it's kind of like a safe space, So I really love that. But again, everybody kind of treats open source a little bit differently and runs their teams a little bit differently. So, before you go and just decide to like invest your life, which is like a lot of what you're doing sometimes when you choose a project, make sure you actually want to be there, right? It's just like work. Do you actually want to be there? I hope you do. Also, again, solving problems maintainers want. Like, again, we all want something, but sometimes we're not going to get it. Like, do I wish that there were more React projects in TypeScript? Yes, I do. But I don't get everything I want all the time, right? But yeah, solve problems maintainers want. I think the next thing also, again, I was talking about, and again, it's the contributing to documentation. Documentation always needs help. Maintainers will always say documentation needs help. There's never ending land of documentation. I think another thing that you can do is like just go, I'll give you an example of RxJS again. You can just go around and Google things like subject versus behavior subject. And I'm sure there's tons of people asking this question. If you know the answer, it doesn't have to be direct contributions to the documentation, but you can be helpful in other avenues and other forums. And that helps with the education generally of, a library, right? Same thing with Angular, of course, same thing with anything. So do that. And, I think another way to look at open source and being helpful is think about all the things you don't want to do at work. So, I know this is a very broad statement, but do you love reviewing PRs at work? Do you love writing documentation at work? If you don't love it, probably helping a team do that is probably going to be way more than a welcome, right? So think about those things and then, help out in those ways, and people will be very thankful. I think also educating and sharing. We all love Deborah. Tom brought it up. Like, Deborah has been educating us forever. And, she didn't like write NGRX, right? But she has reached further, I feel like, than something like NGRX because of the education and because of the people she's touched. And she's so valued in our community because of the education and the sharing and her willingness to be out there in the community. So educating and sharing is so important generally, and don't think that that's not. And it can be small things, like, for example, sorry to pick on you again, Deborah, but you can just take Deborah's talk and like summarize it and put it in a blog post, because that's useful. Obviously reference Deborah and credit her, but like, everybody learns differently. The way something's explained to you is going to be, if you explain to somebody else, you're going to help educate somebody else. So all those different types of things are really important. Same thing with Jessica's talk, right? Those types of things, and even just looking at the changelog in Angular and writing a blog post weekly about what the changelog is really helpful. So any education, any sharing is really welcome. The last thing I want to go through is just some do's and don'ts. Just making sure you have compassion, treating maintainers like people. Everybody's working typically for open source on their free time. So it's hard. It's a hard life out there. Be professional. You're not working with these people professionally. Like, let's say you're not going to a job per se, but Angular has a great code of conduct, for example. Everybody kind of expects you to be professional. Assuming the best intentions is really important as well. It's tireless to make everyone happy. It's just not possible, unfortunately, even though I would love it to be. And abiding by that code of conduct, like I just said. Also, you know, I feel like the don'ts are just don't be or act entitled. You know, a lot of times people are just busy. Like, for example, there's this guy that submitted a ton of really amazing docs PRs to RxJS recently. And, you know, he heard me talk and he's like, hey, Tracy, I have these like 4 open PRs. Do you think you could help me? And, you know, I had a second. So I was like, yeah, sure. And I just was trying to figure out what was going on. And, you know, some of his PRs were open for like 15 days or so. And all I had to do was like ping Ben or Jannik, because they were already working on it, and say, hey, can you guys just take a look at this again? And then, you know, they were merged in the next few days, right? So again, it's not because anybody's ignoring you. It's just because, you know, life is life, right? I would say don't be annoying as well. But like, on the other hand, definitely follow up. I don't feel like people follow up enough in our industry. Like, oh, I don't want to bother you. It's, you know, like, oh, they're probably too busy, or like, oh, maybe I'm not important. Like, that's all in your head. Sometimes it might be true. But like, if you follow up within reason, you know, every week or something like that, people will probably respond to you. Also, don't complain. You know, you can always fork a library if you want. But, you know, you are getting a piece of software for free. So some people will say, if you don't like it, go use something else. But, you know, complaining is unfortunately not going to get you very far. So, yeah, hopefully you all learned a little bit. I wish I had a little bit more time to chat. But, you know, if you want to email me or have any questions, you can definitely email me, Tracy@this. We do have an amazing team. I do love them to pieces. So you can always come hang out with us. And that is my talk.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're
Does anyone have
welcome.
any questions for Tracy before she pops off? Okay, well, oh, Romek, have you got one there? You appeared to be gesturing.
No, I was just gesturing a thank you.
Oh, yes, she certainly deserves that. So if you don't mind, I'd like to give thanks through clapping, if that's right. A round of applause if you're up for it. Here we go.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And I will say that, yes, and then the other question is, what were your biggest challenges getting started? It's just getting started. It's just taking that step. Taking the first step. That's all you got to do. All right. Have a great day, y'all. And check out Angular World Tour too. You know, if some of you are visiting this meetup not from Angular Sussex and you want us to come to your city, or if you know folks in other cities, always happy to come to your city. So angularworldtour.com.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
I will just as an and finally for any latecomers to the chat. This link here I'll post a link to on that site to the YouTube video of this meeting, this meetup. So you guys can view it again and catch up with the links and all that kind of stuff. So I just want to say big thank you to Jessica, Deborah, and Tracy. I'm much obliged for your visit. It's very nice to have you here. Please feel welcome to come again. Okay, and all in the audience, thank you. All right, thanks for coming. You make it what it is. We all appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you for the wonderful sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was really cool.
Cool.
Bye. Thanks, Tom.
Bye.
Thank you.